Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has discussed occupied Kashmir situation with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. The two leaders also discussed Pakistan-China economic ties during their meeting in Beijing. Prime Minister Khan is in China on an official two-day visit. Khan is also holding talks on progress made in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor project. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says it hopes India and Pakistan will hold a talk on the Kashmir dispute. It said the two countries should enhance mutual trust and improve relations.
China calls on India and Pakistan to strengthen dialogue on disputes, including Kashmir, to enhance mutual trust and improve relations. This is in line with the common interests of both India and Pakistan and is the common expectation of the countries and the international community.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Islamabad and Beijing enjoy friendly ties, and both countries talk each other into confidence on all regional and global issues. At a press conference in Beijing, Qureshi said the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will benefit the whole region. He says Pakistan has formed an authority to ensure the project's timely completion. Qureshi added Pakistan wants to enhance economic cooperation with China. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan has made great advances in easing conditions for doing business in the country. Speaking in Beijing to the China Council for Promoting Trade, Khan said Pakistan presents a huge opportunity for investment and trade. Prime Minister Khan said the country has a vital strategic location, a bustling young population and investor-friendly policies. He added the government is removing obstacles to industries in Pakistan. The Prime Minister talked about special economic zones established in Pakistan to eliminate trade and investment barriers. Khan pointed out textiles, IT and tourism, amongst other sectors, have the most potential. He added Islamabad has created a new CPEC authority under the Prime Minister's office to help operations run smoothly. The Prime Minister said the Gwadar Port Master Plan has been improved and tax relief granted at the port. Now, for more on this, we are joined now from Beijing by our correspondent Patrick Falk. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us. Now, Patrick, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and regional security and the Kashmir issues are at the top of Prime Minister Khan's agenda on his visit to China. So, Mr. Patrick, can you please share the details of the meetings and tell us if he has had so far?
This visit continues this long-standing tradition of the two countries regularly meeting to consult each other on matters related to bilateral, regional and international issues of mutual interest. A lot's being made about the timing of this visit coming ahead of President Xi's visit to India, where he's expected to meet with India's Prime Minister Modi. But there is very clearly a focus on economic and trade ties between Pakistan and China. Of course, CPEC is at the top of the agenda in that regard, and they are, as far as we understand, going to be advising China on speeding up the CPEC projects, which have of late been reportedly slowing down. But the Pakistan delegation is here to reassure China that it is very much on course and wants to expand on some of the projects as well.
Patrick, Prime Minister Khan made a very powerful speech to the Chinese investors at today's business forum. Considering the massive state investment made through CPEC, how interested are the Chinese corporations in the emerging Pakistani market?
Well, as we know, it's a strategic ally, and it is a core focus, being part of the Bulletin roads project as well. We are told that there are a number of projects that Pakistan would like to expand on, including LNG terminals, the Bunji hydropower project, as well as steel mills and refineries as well. What sort of response there's been from China for the time being, we just don't know, but certainly these are going to be of interest to China, who certainly want to continue with the CPEC project and the continuation of BRI.
And Patrick, lastly, China is a party to the Kashmir dispute, and Khan's visit to Beijing comes just a few days ahead of President Xi's trip to India. So, Patrick, can we expect him to try to reduce tensions between India and Pakistan when he meets Prime Minister Modi?
Well, that'll certainly be Prime Minister Khan's hope, and as I said before, much has been made about the timing for this visit coming just 3 days before President Xi heads to India, where he'll meet Prime Minister Modi. Now, the big question is to what extent China is going to get involved. Previously, we've spoken before about China perhaps wanting to play the role of peacemaker between the two sides, and of course China has its own interests in the region as well. But there's a big doubt as to whether or not President Xi will want to talk to any great extent on that matter with Prime Minister Modi, given the economic and trade ties that is being placed as a matter of importance to China between China and India as well.
Thank you, Patrick, for your updates. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for more on this, we are also joined by Mr. Humayun Khan. He's the Director of Pakistan Council for China. Thank you for your time, Mr. Khan. So, Mr. Khan, how can Prime Minister Imran Khan's trip to China strengthen trade ties between the two countries and strengthen CPEC?
Prime Minister Khan has gone there to give assurances to the Chinese leadership, and not only Prime Minister Khan, along with him, the military leadership is also with him, which also gives a signal that both the civil and military leadership are on the same page, and government of Pakistan is committed in terms of implementing the second phase of CPEC project. And he already had met at least 6 to 7 CEOs of the big Chinese multi-billion-dollar companies in China. The idea is to invite them again to come to Pakistan and invest more. So this is basically a trip in which, apart from other foreign policy related things, he is going to give assurances that the government of Pakistan is committed in terms of implementing the CPEC projects, which was a perception which earlier was with the Western media that they are not. So in my opinion, this is a very significant trip, and this is the third time he is in China in the last 5 to 6 months.
Now, Mr. Humayun, as we know, Imran Khan's visit to Beijing comes just a few days ahead of President Xi's trip to India. So how important is this visit for regional cooperation and security? And can we expect tangible results?
It's a very, very important trip in terms of its timing. President Xi Jinping is going to India from 10th to 13th of October for the second informal summit. And this is basically in the wake of Article 370 revocation by the Indian Prime Minister Modi's government. This has been a practice between China and Pakistan. Whenever there is an issue of utmost importance, there has been a regular interaction in the past where the high leadership of both the countries interact whenever there is a situation, and otherwise as well, there's a regular interaction. So this particular trip is going to be updating the Chinese leadership and also taking into the confidence the measures which Pakistan is going to take and seeking their support. China has been a tremendous supporter in the past as well, and particularly in the last 2 months. Chinese were fully supportive of Pakistan in the United Nations Security Council, in the General Assembly, and other human rights institutions as well.
Right, thank you, Mr. Humayun Khan, Director of Pakistan Council for China, for your time and your insight. Now, moving on, Indian forces have killed another Kashmiri citizen in the occupied valley. The civilian was targeted by occupation troops during a search and cordon operation in Pulwama district. 8 Kashmiris were martyred by occupation forces in Ganderbal district last week. Meanwhile, Pakistan's UN envoy Maliha Lodhi highlighted the plight of women and children in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Addressing a discussion forum at UNGA, Lodhi exposed the atrocities of Indian forces as the valley remains under a complete curfew. Referring to a story in New York Times, she said, "Anguish of a Kashmiri mother was captured by a heart-wrenching picture in the newspaper." New Delhi's curfew has entered its 65th consecutive day. Meanwhile, 284 Indian academics, politicians and journalists have called occupied Kashmir's annexation and lockdown unacceptable. In a letter to Indian Prime Minister Modi, they have asked for an immediate end to the communications blackout in the valley. The Indian intellectual said the Modi's administration's decision to deactivate Article 370 of the Constitution was taken without consulting Kashmiris. They asked Modi to roll back his government's illegal decision and allow Kashmiris to decide their constitutional status. They called on the Indian government to end the communications blackout in the valley on humanitarian grounds. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Sikhs across the world have lauded the Kartarpur corridor project. In an interview, Qureshi said the Sikh community in Europe and Canada has shown an overwhelming response over the project. He said Pakistan is preparing accommodation and other necessary facilities for their visit next month. Pakistan will open the corridor on 9th of November, days before Sikhism's founder Baba Guru Nanak's 550th birth anniversary on 12th of November. Now moving on, US President Donald Trump has threatened to destroy Turkey's economy if it takes any unlawful action in Syria. Earlier, the United States started withdrawing its troops from northeastern Syria to make way for a Turkish operation against Kurdish fighters.
US President Donald Trump is threatening to destroy Turkey's economy if it takes any unlawful actions in Syria. Earlier, the United States began withdrawing its troops from northeastern Syria to make way for a Turkish operation against Kurdish fighters. At the White House, Trump said he warned President Tayyip Erdogan that Turkey could find itself with a ravaged economy.
That was many, many years ago, and we only have 50 people in that area. That's a small sector, and I don't want those 50 people hurt or killed or anything. I don't want anything bad to happen to our people, and I told that to President Erdogan. I said, don't hurt any of our people get hurt. Big trouble.
Kurdish-led forces have been a key US ally in Syria against ISIS, but Turkey regards them as terrorists. Earlier, President Erdogan said his country is determined to clear the border region of terrorists and ensure Turkey's security. The SDF says the troop withdrawal is a breach of US commitments that will have a negative impact on the war against ISIS.
Now, the European Union has warned Turkey against a military operation in northeastern Syria. EU High Representative Federica Mogherini said the incursion will undermine the international coalition's fight against ISIS. Mogherini said military action by Turkey will hamper the UN-led political process in the region. The statement comes in response to the US pulling its troops out of northeastern Syria. The White House said Ankara will now be responsible for all ISIS fighters captured in the area in the last 2 years. Meanwhile, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara is determined to clear the border region of terrorists and ensure Turkish security. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif discussed the issue with his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu over the phone. Speaking after the phone call, Zarif said Ankara should respect Syria's territorial integrity while fighting terrorists. The UN says it's prepared to cooperate with Turkey on a possible military operation in northern Syria. In an interview, UN Assistant Secretary General Panos Momtaziz said Ankara has made the necessary assurances on humanitarian issues. Momtaziz praised Ankara's role in supporting humanitarian operations in the region over the years. He said Turkey's generosity with refugees needs to continue. 3 militants from the Kurdistan Workers' Party have been killed in Turkish airstrikes during a counter-terrorism operation in northern Iraq. A statement from Turkey's National Defense Ministry says military operations backed by air power were carried out in the Gara region. The ministry says Turkey will continue to destroy terrorist weapons, cache and shelters. Over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 4 months. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terrorist campaign. Now moving to central Afghanistan, where 20 students, including 15 women and 5 men, have been injured in a blast inside Ghazni University. Provincial hospital head Baz Muhammad says the bomb went off during a lecture at the university. The official said the injured have been taken to a nearby hospital and security forces have cordoned off the area. Condemning the attack, Taliban said targeting innocent civilians is a violation of Islamic and human principles. Meanwhile, Iraq's military has admitted that it has used excessive force in deadly anti-government protests. The military said force outside the rules of engagement was used. It said commanding officers involved will be held accountable. President Barham Saleh has called for a halt to escalations after widespread protests. In a televised speech, Saleh urged security forces to preserve the rights of all Iraqis and called for de-escalation. The president also urged Parliament to enact reforms, including electoral reform, to address the demands of protesters.
The government and the security forces reaffirmed that there has been no orders to fire at protesters, and it has not been issued by the country and their instruments. Therefore, those who are committing these actions are criminals and outlaws.
It's time for a short break. Stay tuned with Indus News. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The UK is bracing for more demonstrations after 300 people were arrested in central London on the first day of the Extinction Rebellion protest. The protesters are demanding urgent action against climate change. The Extinction Rebellion, also known as XR, says the mass protests will go on for 2 weeks. The group took to the streets of the British capital on Monday morning as part of a fresh international rebellion. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged London's police to use the full force of the law against the protesters. The activists are also protesting in Berlin, Amsterdam and Sydney. Ukraine is accusing Russia of stalling the Normandy Format summit despite all of its preconditions being met. The Normandy 4 includes Ukraine, France, Germany and Russia. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Vadim Prystaiko says Russia is looking for excuses by adding a new condition before setting a date for the peace talks. Prystaiko says a ceasefire and the approval of the Saint-Meyer formula were the only preconditions set by the Kremlin for the dialogue. Prystaiko says Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and his entire team are trying to complete the Minsk process. In the meantime, thousands of people rallied in Kiev against Zelensky's plan to grant autonomy to the eastern Donbass region. A UN racism expert has criticized the Dutch ban on wearing face coverings, saying the law has no place in a tolerant society. The UN Special Rapporteur on Racism, Tendai Ashimi, says the ban reflects a wider consolidation of Islamophobia in the Netherlands. Ashimi said the ban has no place in a society which prides itself in promoting gender equality. Under the ban, people must be recognizable in public spaces, so it applies to face covering helmets or hoods and is punishable by 150 euros fine. The Dutch ban took effect in August after being passed by Parliament in 2018. The ban makes it illegal to wear face coverings in public buildings and on transport. The people of Pakistan are commemorating the 14th anniversary of the catastrophic earthquake of 2005. 73,000 people lost their lives and over 100,000 were injured in the 7.6 magnitude quake. The natural calamity left over 3.5 million people homeless.
The 8th of October will always be remembered as a day of mourning in Pakistan's history. Millions lost their loved ones and everything else in a matter of seconds. 14 years later, people of the former disaster zone still vividly remember their suffering. Because of the gigantic scale of the event, the government couldn't cope alone. The people of Pakistan stepped in to shore up the rescue and funding operation. And so did the rest of the world, with a helping hand in search and rescue, and later the rehabilitation of the affected people.
CIRA has completed 5,540 projects and handed over to the line departments. 1,300 projects are underway and 900 projects are yet to be started due to the paucity of funds.
The National Disaster Management Authority now marks October 8th as National Resilience Day.
We have now notified this day as National Resilience Day. We want to exhibit our resolve that this country and its people are resilient to different disasters. We have withstood mega disasters unknown in the recent history.
MDMA spokesman says the lion's share of reconstruction work after the earthquake has been completed.
So they have, as of now, completed 73% of all those conceived projects. 15% of the projects are ongoing and they are under implementation, while around 12% of the projects have been stopped.
Last week's earthquake in Mirpur revived unhappy memories of the 2005 disaster.
A major killer in the West. Until the mid-20th century, tuberculosis still remains a menace in India. A World Health Organization report says the disease killed over 400,000 people in India in 2017. Roughly 3 million new cases have been identified in the last year. This report will tell you more.
In the congested lanes south of New Delhi, TB patients come to take their daily medication in a tiny clinic run by an NGO. Some visitors wear masks, some wrap scarves over their mouths to avoid contaminating others. In India, the epidemic spreads easily in overcrowded cities where immune systems are already weakened by poor sanitary conditions. Poorly administered anti-TB drugs and treatments are a major worry for health workers and are responsible for spreading its drug-resistant strains.
The only way to move towards a reduction of numbers is find as many as possible, and remember that every TB patient, every undiagnosed, untreated patient infects 12 others. When you find one case and you treat him well, you have stopped a fountainhead.
The bacterium mainly attacks middle-aged men, the family breadwinner, piling up additional misery.
Again, it's difficult to deal with and it needs the right kind of diagnosis, but there is medication available now, except the access to these drugs is limited and they are pretty expensive.
The BJP government wants financial aid from the Global Fund to fight the epidemic. Overcoming the TB epidemic by 2025 was a part of the BJP's recent election manifesto.
Business stories now. Uncertainty about the outcome of resumed trade talks between the US and China has had a mixed effect on stock markets in Asia and Europe. Investor confidence has been undermined by reports that Beijing is reluctant to sign the broad-based trade agreement wanted by US President Trump. The CAC 40 index in Paris is trading 0.33% lower. The DAX in Frankfurt has followed suit despite an unexpected resurgence in Germany's manufacturing sector in September. The FTSE 100 in London is flat. In Asia, confusion about the fresh trade talks between Beijing and Washington saw markets retreat from early gains. The Shanghai Composite and Hong Kong's Hang Seng index closed fractionally higher. But Asia's richest bourse, the Nikkei 225 in Tokyo, rose by more than 1%. South Korea's Kospi Index also peaked up well over 1% after market heavyweight Samsung gained ground. Now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.